love the internet. We live streamed yesterday our structures management presentation, and I screwed up my introduction doing a distinction between generalist and specialist. And I got emails overnight clarifying the difference. So most of you, I think a lot of you are specialists, and the definition of a specialist is you learn more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing. I, on the other hand, am a generalist. I've learned less and less about more and more, and now I know nothing about everything. I'm here to speak to you this morning about our journey in terms of implementing agency-wide asset management. We've been on this since about 2011. Here's sort of the overview of what we're going to cover this morning. The grand strategy, the overarching strategy that got us going, our asset management organization and our structure, the vision that we have, but the process of execution, which I think is probably what most of you are interested in, is how you actually go about executing this, getting it implemented in your organization, how to build the systems, how to make it real, and getting to a true enterprise system. We talk about enterprise asset management, but an enterprise asset management system isn't just a bunch of modules that you sort of Velcroed together and hope that it builds an enterprise system. There's a lot of data integration that goes on. There's a lot of common language that you have to develop, common understanding, common models if you're really going to have apples-to-apples comparisons when you're making decisions about various assets. And furthering the enterprise, what we hope to do in the future. Strategy Grande. When Commissioner McDonald came to the DOT in 2011, she's a planner. She's an outstanding commissioner. And she really had two goals for us. One was to develop a world-class capital investment program. And we've taken a lot more control of the capital program centrally from an asset management perspective. And she wanted us to become a national leader in asset management. So those are two really big challenges that we had. Our organization structure, as you see, there's a whole array of different groups in the department that are involved in this. I'll get into a little bit of the fact that we are doing asset management through a governance structure, not through a central asset management organization. And actually, that's worked pretty well for us. And this all started with what we call CAMC. No one ever remembers what CAMC stands for. We talk about CAMC. It's the Comprehensive Asset Management Capital Investment Team. But it was really the think tank that when we got the challenges from the commissioner that said, how are we going to go and organize to do this? So the challenge was to build an organizational framework. How do we want to do this? Do we want to have a central organization? Do we want to do governance? How do we want to go about doing that? Defining our strategy for asset management implementation. Program review. Our program review process used to be a nod and a wink. We put out capital program update instructions. The region that were almost impossible to achieve. The regions would submit their programs. We'd wink and nod at them and say they did a great job, and we'd continue on with the program, with no kind of central accountability or organization holding the regions accountable to certain performance levels, those kind of things. So we've changed that. Capital planning, how we do that in-house through the MPOs with the locals. All of this is fleshed out in our capital program update instructions, and that we wanted to create and maintain enterprise-wide asset management system. With the whole idea being, organizations change, leadership changes, but I'm a big believer if you create the organization, structure, systems, strategy, structure, systems, most of you probably know that, that will outlast fluctuations in administrations. Okay, the image didn't show up. Oh, there we go. We started off by establishing 4 principles for asset management. The 2 that are most important to me are preservation first. Part of getting started is I wrote a paper about the looming infrastructure crisis in New York. In 2011, we were projecting 40% poor pavements, even poor pavements on the interstate system by 2018, because of the way we sub-optimize our program. Systems Not Projects gets at that whole notion of sub-optimization. Some of you are probably familiar with W. Edwards Deming. Deming said you can never optimize a system by sub-optimizing the components of that system. That is the classic federal aid project development process. It's one of sub-optimization. We take everything from point A to point B, and we make it absolutely perfect. We make huge investments of it, and that little pinprick on the map is perfect, and it's surrounded by all kinds of bad pavement and bad bridges and all of that. And you can never get there because of the extremely high cost of those major investments. You can never manage your system and get your system into a better state of repair by following that. So that fundamentally changed the way we manage the program. Preservation is a cornerstone of our program. When we allocate funds, 60% of our funds go to preservation. And the beauty of investing that way is it rewards success, because we allocate based on need, and you only have candidates for preservation if you're keeping your system in good condition. So if you are keeping the good, you get more money than the people who have let the good fall to fair and poor. So it rewards folks that do preservation. And everyone knows best first strategy is far better than a worst first strategy. And the rest of the funds, 25% of the funding, is statewide competition. So it is really needs-based on a statewide basis. So no one is entitled to a certain funding amount. And we talk about return on investment. That's embedded in all of this. And we want to make sustainable investments. We don't want quick fixes. We don't want to diamond grind pavements just to meet federal performance measure, those kind of things. We don't want to go there. We want to make good, solid, sustainable decisions. One thing we did, some of you might have met Brad Allen, who used to work with us. We've done too good a job of grooming him. He's moved on to the private sector. He's working with AppTech now. But I'm a big believer in getting your sort of up-and-comers in your organization out and seeing kind of what's going on at the national level. So we got Brad on the FHWA Expert Task Group for Asset Management, and he's become a real national leader in asset management. And he helped us by bringing a national perspective, new ideas from other places, into the agency to help create a bigger framework. And just by the sheer fact that I've gotten a lot older since I started with the department, I have a lot of expertise organizationally. So I know how to do the organizational capacity stuff. I know what we can do and what we can't do. So Brad brought the expertise. I brought the organizational understanding, and the partnership between the two of us worked really well. That FHWA Expert Task Group really had 4 goals: is to create a framework for sustainable infrastructure and service delivery, to identify strategies for advancing the asset management practice, to provide feedback to FHWA so they could continuously improve, and to provide a plan for communicating this information on asset management so all the states could get better. We're a pilot state for asset management planning, which was kind of interesting. Being a pilot state, no one had written a TAMP before. No one really knew how to organize a TAMP. And we spent, the first half of the project was actually fairly simple and straightforward, because we're just collecting, we're doing analysis, we're getting folks to write up various sections. And we did that in a few months. But then we ran into, how do we organize this into a coherent narrative? And that is really the challenge, because we spent another 4 months trying to figure out how to organize this into a way that folks would make sense to folks as a story. So the structure we came up with, we come up with a summary listing of the assets that you have. It's in our asset inventory and what the condition is of those assets. what our management objectives and measures are, looking at where the performance gaps are and how we're going to try to fill those. Lifecycle cost and risk management. It's called risk-based asset management planning. I think we're still kind of figuring out what the risk-based part of that is. The best I can come up with is bridge management, because you want to make good, solid investments in bridges, but not take just a worst first perspective. So you have a bridge safety assurance program that keeps your bridges safe, and then you can then invest more on a preservation basis to try to manage your whole system. I think that's what that means. Our financial plan, which was kind of fascinating from the perspective, if you actually go through the exercise of deconstructing the funds that you get from Federal Highway, we get $4 billion. And by the time you take funds off that go to MTA and the locals and construction inspection, administration, et cetera, we have about $750 million left, 20 cents on the dollar, to actually invest in pavements and bridges. That's a little bit shocking, but that's something that you get out of this exercise when you take the funding and deconstruct it. And it raises the question, should we be investing that way? We go through a financial plan and our investment strategies, which I'll get into a little bit. Here's the vision. This is a very simple way of expressing the vision. One infrastructure, one department, and one system to rule them all. Lord of the Rings fans out there? So what is the vision? Part of it is to develop an agency-wide enterprise system. What we don't want is a bunch of pieces where the structures people have their piece and the pavement people have their piece. We want a system that everybody, if you're a maintenance engineer and you need to know something about drainage structure on a certain route because you've got flooding, you want that maintenance engineer to be able to get in there and see that without having to go to an expert in that area to try to get that information. We want this information to be widely available and easily accessible to folks. Fully integrated across the enterprise, which really fully integrated across the enterprise, meaning that you bring all the stakeholders in. So that when you design the structures module, you don't just have structures folks in there, you have bridge maintenance folks in there, planning people in there, so that you have all your stakeholder needs addressed when you design these things. One mind design. That sounds simple, but when you're bringing experts into the room and they're bringing in their systems that they've developed, everyone has defined things differently. Some people do things on spreadsheets, do things in Access, have different structures, different navigation, different look, feel. We want a system that looks like it was designed by one mind, so that if you know how the pavement management module works and you go into the bridge management module or look at some other secondary asset, the look, feel, navigation definitions are all the same. We try to use the NBE definitions as measures, so that no matter what asset you're looking at, you don't have to figure out, is this a 1 to 7 scoring system? Is it a 1 to 4 scoring system? They're all the same. This will serve as the system of record for all of our assets. But I joke that when we design systems, we focus on how to get the data in. That's the first half. But then we've implemented the system, and then we need to figure out how to get the data out. And we're going to talk a little bit about system of engagement as a way of being able to get that data out in a simple way. And another important thing is you want everything referenced linearly the same way. So everything is built on one common Esri Roads and Highways LRS. And that becomes important in terms of building a system of engagement. Because you want to be able to drill into the tabular data through a map, and to do that, it has to be on your LRS. Execution. This was really, I hope I do a decent job of explaining this. A real key to our success is establishing a roadmap. That has helped us quite a bit with our state controller when we want to move forward. It helps in terms of breaking the system into bite-sized pieces that you can implement over time. We do phased implementation. It helps because it is enabling us to literally retire dozens of ad hoc applications and be able to get, and all the skill sets that have to go with supporting those different applications. So we limited it to the current systems. You know, we only want to implement stuff that we're pretty good at, that we know, that we understand. So we know we can be successful. If you don't have a good business process, implementing a poor or unknown business process and putting it into a system doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? We address the highest value assets first. That's why we started with bridges and went quickly to pavements. We created one centralized Oracle database so that can be much more efficiently and effectively maintained. We separated web content management because that increases our transaction speeds. So the web content, photos, sketches, plan sheets, all of that stuff is managed separately and kept in a separate database. We want to be able to collect data in the field for inspectors as well as maintenance workers. So maintenance workers, when they go out on a day-to-day basis, they don't have to come back to the shop, you know, a half hour or so early, just so they can do their reporting. And you get more accurate, we think we're going to get much more accurate data by capturing it in the field. You can geoposition the work that you did out there. You can take pictures. You can do it while it's still fresh in your mind. I mentioned the linear referencing part and the phased implementation, and I'm going to get into that. So here's the roadmap phases. The first phase it went live 2015, is our bridge data system. That includes bridge and large culvert inventory inspection, vulnerability analysis, you know, seismic vulnerabilities, fracture critical vulnerabilities, hydraulic vulnerabilities, those kind of things. Load ratings, bridge flags. We, for the first time this year, we did our federal tape, our federal reporting using NBE, National Bridge Elements. And the inspectors do the data collection. We have state and contract bridge inspectors, and they're doing their data collection in the field using FTC. Pavement and structures managed, the next phase that we're right in the middle of right now, we are going live next year, is pavement and structures management and asset trade-off analysis, which is now called portfolio analyst. That includes the pavement management pieces where we're doing the Esri roads and highways integration, because that's the logical pace. Pavement management and linear referencing and roadway inventory and all of that is very closely aligned. The pavement and bridge modeling is done there. We have Mike Rossi here who developed our pavement management system. We have the person that developed our bridge needs model is very close to retirement, so we want to be able to get that done before she leaves. Because we're a one-of organization. You know, if Ellen Zinni leaves or Mike leaves, 90% of our knowledge of pavement and bridge needs modeling goes. So we want to get it in a system that can be sustained. Cross-asset trade-off, and I'll get into that more. That is a fascinating thing to me. That is sort of the holy grail of asset management. And we're also doing some secondary assets. So that's why instead of calling it bridge management, we call it structures management, because as part of the structures management module, we're also doing overhead sign structures. We actually move small culverts into MMS, retaining and noise walls and historic bridges. Keeping them all in SMS too it has a slightly more complex QA process than we do for the real secondary assets like guide rail and signs, where we really don't have a QC or QA. And the stuff in SMS is probably more aligned to use an FDC type of solution than the stuff in MMS, where we can actually use a tablet. Maintenance management, which is very near and dear to my heart, because it's hard to believe, in about 2006, we implemented our current maintenance management system. And now in 2018, we'll be replacing that with MMS. And our implementation is kind of standard MMS implementation, daily work reporting, time and attendance, equipment materials, work accomplishment. Stockpile management, which is a huge thing in New York. We, in New York, I manage our budget. We have a $245 million budget for non-personal services. 75 million of that is for salt. That is 1 million tons of salt. 1 million tons of salt is 2 football fields side by side in a 30-story building. That is how much salt we put down. And in the winter, we have a salt model that we use weekly that looks at how much salt folks have in their barns, what is their capacity, how much money do they have available in encumbrances, a whole bunch of stuff. We take that all into account, and we make regional allocations, residency-based allocations weekly, putting the money where the need is. And the interesting thing is, at the height of winter, pay periods 22, 23, late January, early February, we will have $18 million in float, $18 million of salt in some order status. That is something that we've learned over time. So you can't just look at capacity and need. You have to also look at stuff that has been ordered and not delivered, or delivered and not paid for, to really get a sense of what the needs are. So we've gotten a lot more sophisticated with that, and that's really critical in New York. Facilities management, which is kind of new to us. Signals and signal lab management. Signals is done currently in Cartograph. We're bringing that into our application. And I went to the signals presentation yesterday, and I see a lot of that was focused on the actual structures, the mast arms, span wire, signal poles, those kind of things. But a lot of what we're focusing on is the assemblies, the components, the controllers, those kind of things, and our signal labs, where we get batches of signal parts in, they get tested. They get determined whether they're okay. They go out in the field. We track them for warranty purposes, those kind of things. We're doing AVL integration, which the last conference we listened to a gentleman from Idaho, which I thought was really cool. They take back-end information off the plow truck. AVL, we have AVL where we know where the trucks are, but what we really want is the back-end stuff that tells us what the chemical concentration is that's coming out of the spreader hopper, plow up, plow down, where the plow is, all of that kind of stuff. So we know, and that actually generates our what we call daily work reports, which would be the day cards and the work orders in MMS. And that to me is just really cool. And we're working hard with Charles to try to get that implemented. And we're pilot state for the mobile solution. We also sort of stumbled on Right-of-Way Manager as we're in the middle of the project. The right-of-way folks said, hey, can we play too? Can we be part of this? So we're also doing Right-of-Way Manager. RIS, and as we're getting into the system, this wasn't really pre-planned either, but Roadway Inventory and HPMS submittal and all of that stuff is so integrated with what we're doing with LRS and PMS, and the RIS system that we have now is more getting in the way. So we're trying to integrate that so that we can more logically organize our roadway inventory. And I am trying to encourage our safety and mobility management folks to be part of the system too. That's still out there. Part of the contractually advice I would provide folks that are interested in doing that, we established a contract where essentially we had a contract for BETUS, and then with an option to have 19 different assets that we could potentially implement. And by having that contract set up that way, we can phase the implementation. It's encouraging to Agile to try to continue to do a good job for us, because there will be more work coming as long as things are going well, which they are. So it works from that perspective. And it works with our state controller. because we've established this. We said we've already said we're going to do this. You've approved that. This is this phase, these sets of assets, and it has been extremely helpful in terms of being able to move forward contractually. Some of you saw this, I think one or two of you might have been in the presentation yesterday. We did the structures. I already went kind of over what we were doing with the bridge system. When we implemented this, we sunsetted or retired somewhere between 14 and 18 individual applications by doing this, by pulling all of the bridge information into one system. You know, that is a huge step forward for us. It also makes this information a lot more accessible to, you know, like the bridge maintenance engineers and folks outside of structures. Pavement management. Our pavement management LRS integration is going to go live in 2017. It does deterioration modeling. We have 45 unique, empirically based deterioration curves that we use to determine, you know, what the deterioration is, at what point you're going to do a treatment, and how that treatment is going to go, and then improve the condition, push the condition back up the deterioration curve. And those are geographically based. What we look at is dominant distress, surface rating, IRI, friction, cracking. Most of the pavement folks here are familiar with that. We have created a corridor importance factor that tells us, you know, that certain corridors are more important. If they're corridors that are critical to agriculture, the move of those goods, critical because there's a concentration of jobs. We've built that into factoring, you know, which projects become more important to us. We've created a pavement condition index. What we do is needs modeling on a dollar per VMT basis, which means what is the lowest cost solution that addresses the highest number of travelers. So we're trying to get the best bang for the buck. So our candidate projects are prioritized on a dollar per VMT basis for preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, and renewal. Really, what that does is creates the candidates. It doesn't create the projects. We take the candidates, we provide them to the regions, and the regions go and then look and try to create actual logical projects out of that candidate information. It's integrated with PSS, our project support system. That way we bring in actual projects that are on the program. So when we extrapolate out what end conditions are going to be, we're taking into account not just candidate projects, theoretical projects, but projects that are actually on the program. The outcome expectations. Again, I mentioned earlier that we are now taking more central control over the program. So what we look at is percent VMT on good and excellent pavements. We look at what is achievable for a region and set a target that's less than that, but something that should be achieved to try to hold them accountable. We also look at backlog and percent poor. We've also come to realize that, you know, when you develop an enterprise system, we have different definitions definitions in pavements and bridges for how those backlogs are calculated. And part of this is trying to get everyone using the same model for backlog so that we can make apples to apples trade-offs. And percent poor. You know, even though we want to try to focus on VMT, good and excellent, you really don't want your percent poor to go certainly more than like 10%. We're trying to hold it at that level. Payment management also does scenario generation. When you do asset trade-off or portfolio analysis, it isn't trading off all the projects. You create an optimized scenario for your pavements, an optimized scenario for your bridges, and that goes into your asset trade-off. And we are using the LRS. By keeping everything on the LRS, as the LRS is updated over time, it keeps all the asset location information updated so that everything stays in the right spot on the map. Structures management, similarly, we hired Cooney. We've taken 20 or 30 years of bridge data. to develop empirical or element level empirical deterioration curves. So we know how, on average, every element of a bridge deteriorates. So we look at what the condition of an element is. We look at how it deteriorates. We know what the window of opportunity for a treatment is. We look at what the treatment ends up needing to be, and then combining those treatments into project definition or recommendation. So if all that's bad is a couple elements on the bridge, we do an element level project. If the deterioration on a bridge, typical pathology on a bridge is, especially like in a state like New York where we use a lot of salt, is a bridge joint leaks. Salt goes through the joint, corrodes the girder ends, you get section loss in the girder ends, you get pack rust in the bearings freeze, columns crack, et cetera. That's kind of how a bridge deteriorates. So what we do are what we call vertical down projects, where you fix everything in that vertical line. If something's more complex, it could be a deck replacement, it could be a minor rehab or a major rehab. Obviously, if the foundation is failing, if the substructure is failing, you're stuck doing a replacement. But that's kind of how we do needs modeling in New York. We also use ranking analysis, or in Agile terms, priority analysis. We don't use optimization right now. That ranking analysis takes into account not just the condition of the bridge, but we look at vulnerabilities, if it's load posted, what the detour lengths are. So we're taking all of those into account and creating an index that allows us to rank bridge projects. We're still interested in optimization. We just we need to get there. What we don't use yet is we've just gone to NBE. We don't use NBE or defects for needs modeling. Right now, we are converting the bridge scores, the NBE scores, back to the old 1 to 7 scale, and then model them on the 1 to 7 scale. That's something we need to work on and figure out how defect and extent of defect at the element level will affect our needs models. That's kind of a next step for us. Structures management. Like I mentioned earlier, we have added overhead sign structures, retaining and noise walls to our SMS implementation. And again, in doing that, we have come up with a common tab-based design and process flows for all our secondary assets. So whether you're looking at overhead sign structures or retaining wall or anything, you have an inventory tab, you have an inspection tab, you'll have a tab for your pictures and sketches. If you have, like with retaining walls, we'll have a tab for geometry, those kind of things. But it looks and feels and functions and navigates the same way no matter what module you're in. There's just a sample screen. ATOA. I am really fascinated by ATOA. We hired Decision Lens to develop utility functions and utility curves. Essentially, we bring a bunch of people from planning, a bunch of people from structures, pavement, maintenance, into a room, and Decision Lens comes in and they says, okay, first on the pavement side, what's more important, falling from good to fair, fair to poor, and then we do cross asset. What's more important, a bridge deck, a poor bridge deck, or a poor pavement, and do all of those comparisons, and that generates a utility function that tells us how much generally we should spend on bridges and pavements. What we do is we use the leaky bucket approach to managing both pavements and bridges. For a bridge, for example, the cost to do a treatment on a good bridge, the preventive maintenance treatment, $5,000 to $10,000. To do a corrective repair, $250,000 to $500,000, and a replacement, $5 to $6 million. So as you are going through these condition states, you're going up a factor of 10. So for every, you get to do preventive maintenance on 10 bridges for every one you do a corrective repair on. You can do preventive maintenance on 100 bridges for every bridge you replace. So that gives you the whole idea of systems, not projects. You can treat a lot more of the system if you can keep things in a better condition state. And we use that really to drive our utility analysis. Right now, we're only doing pavements or bridges. I'm a big believer in let's start simple. Pavements and bridges are complicated enough. And what we found out is the rate of deterioration really should drive your initial investment. What you find, and this is completely contrary to common use, common knowledge, is because you're trying to manage condition states, falling from one to the next, pavements deteriorate far more quickly than bridges do. So you're tripping going from preventive maintenance to corrective maintenance to reconstruction for pavements a lot faster. So you're hitting those points where the utility curve says, you got to do something, you got to do something, you got to do something. Where for bridges, they deteriorate a lot more slowly. So the result of the analysis, which I'm still culturally trying to get our folks to begin to think about, is because right now we spend 2/3 of the funding on bridges, 1/3 on pavements. That's probably not unusual in most states because everyone worries about bridges falling down. But if you have a good bridge safety assurance program, that probably shouldn't happen. We look at the economic cost, because what happens is by doing that, the backlog, the value of our pavements is about $50 billion from a GASB perspective. For bridges, it's about 20. So you've got this huge value investment in pavements that are deteriorating very quickly. That drives your backlog cost up very fast. Where with bridges, that doesn't happen nearly as quickly. So from a purely economic standpoint, what we've learned from asset trade-off analysis is that we really should be rethinking our investment strategy and probably put the first $400 or $500 million we get into pavements, and only at that point begin to invest in bridges. I know that's contrary to what most folks do and most folks think, but that's sort of the beauty of doing portfolio analysis, is you begin to raise these kind of questions and get the organization to start to think about them. Maintenance management, I've talked about a lot of this stuff. We are adding non-structural secondary assets, guide rail signs, pavement markings, drainage structures, et cetera, to that. We have hired Fugro. We're going through a pilot project with Fugro to begin to collect all of this secondary asset information. We are using a tablet solution. We're hoping to be able to go with a tablet solution so that everyone in maintenance can both do their day cards and their work orders using a tablet, using MWM every day, but also on the same tablet you can have Esri Collector so that the engineer or the supervisor, when they're out in the field, if they come across a new asset, they want to inventory, inspect it, you have the ability to do that on the tablet. Again, we're adding facilities management. We're only beginning to explore that. Adding snow and ice control and AVL. The big challenge we have in New York is trying to get the vendor to provide the back end, to find a way to get the vendor to provide the back end information. We're trying to work through that right now. And again, we're a pilot state for the mobile solution. Roadway Inventory, this is a partnership between actually Agile, Esri, and Transcend. We're trying to take what we have in our roadway inventory and segregate it out into where it logically belongs. So we have a pavement piece that is really specific to what we do in pavement management. We're trying to take that part of the roadway inventory, move that into the Agile piece. Use Esri Roads and Highways to really manage the LRS, the geometry, inventory. And we brought Transcend in because Transcend has got a great tool for doing HPMS reporting. And what we do currently with roadway inventory is we separate the tabular data from the GIS data. So our folks are doing dual data entry right now to keep the GIS inventory and the tabular inventory in place. And that requires a lot of resources. So we're working with these folks to develop what they're calling a smart entry engine that will support single data entry that will update both the GIS and the tabular data. That's going to be a significant improvement in efficiency. We're hiring one RC with an option for a second RC. I found out with our maintenance management system, when you go to production, you're not done. You know, most sounds like you've all learned that lesson. Yeah. So what we want to be able to do is have an RC come in that's trained and on Agile staff, but who works for us in our building to do everything from simple enhancements, configurations, to Jasper reporting, training, to assist with upgrades, all of that stuff. So we're in the process right now of hiring our first RC, and our feeling is when we go with MMS, we will have a second RC, and that is on top of the support, the premium support package that we have with Agile, and on top of our internal IT support. We really want somebody that has the expertise and connection to Agile to support our system. Enterprise by design. Again, I can't stress this enough. Even though this is an enterprise solution, we have to partner with Agile and Esri and all our partners to make sure, from the agency perspective, that we are designing a true enterprise solution, because it's very easy for the pavement people to design their module and their piece, and they have their definitions, their way of locating stuff, their definitions of backlog, all that kind of stuff. And then the bridge people will do their thing, or the bridge people will only bring their bridge people in to design what their piece is. And you don't want that, because then when you're trying to do cross-asset reporting, that doesn't work. You need to have common language, common definitions for things. You want to have a common approach to how you do scoring, because you want to be able to do apples-to-apples comparison and cross-asset trade-offs somewhere down the line. And if you don't think that through ahead of time, you can't do that. We also want to be able to get away from, you only have security access to this piece or that piece. I'd like to get to the point, I was talking to Keith last night about, in our agency, I'm sure this is not uncommon either, that our downtown immediately needs to know, okay, how many plow trucks do you have on Long Island? What projects do you have in Senator so-and-so's district? By integrating all of that data, our project data, our maintenance data, our pavement data, our accident data, all into one solution, we're going to begin to work with Agile and Esri to develop a system of engagement that should, in theory, instead of the execs calling the maintenance director at 7 o'clock on Friday night to find this information out, and then the maintenance director's got to call somebody else to find out, or call all 10 regions and add everything up. And, we've all been there. We're looking to be able to have a system where it is simple enough that you can go in and pull that data out, simple enough that even an executive can get into the system and use it and be able to pull the data out without having to call us. I'm hoping to get that done before I ever achieve that sort of executive status. So again, it's enterprise by design. The idea is to develop this system of engagement so that you can get the data out and not just put the data in, and make it simple enough. I was explaining to Keith last night that I want it to be as simple. You don't need to know how the Uber app works. You just need to know that it works, right? And that's what we're trying to make something as simple as a simple internet application, so that anyone in the agency can get in and get at this data in a simple and straightforward kind of a way. We want to be able to integrate the spatial and tabular integration. What you really want to be able to do is go to a map. We are DOTs. It's funny, we keep everything in tabular form, but highways, most people think about highways, they think about maps. You know, I want to know what's going on in this corridor. Be able to go and look at a corridor and say, what's the accident history in this corridor? What's the pavement friction? What's the average running speed? What's the signal timing? What is the maintenance history? And be able to find out everything there is to know about that section of highway. And be able to go to your photo log and say, you know, I want to look and actually see what that looks like. And then if we get really cool, we work with folks like, if we have a LiDAR cloud, we have folks like Numetrics. You can go and look at that image and you can measure, well, what's the pavement width? Not have to look it up. You can actually use a measuring tool and say at this location exactly what's the width of this. You can begin to actually do design because now you've got your pavement information. You know what your pavement section is. You know what your pavement condition is. You know what the condition of your guide rail is. You could do a vendor-in-place paving project. You can do you can do your safe tap part because you know what the condition of your rail is. And Stan Burns, if any of you know Stan out in Utah, they have shown they can do a 15-minute VPP, including rail and everything else, just from the information that's in the system. There's no running out into the field and coming back and running out, and I need to go out and count the mailboxes, I need to go out and measure the rail, it is all there in the system. Also, you know, if you're a maintenance engineer, you get a complaint, somebody says, I have a drainage problem at this section of highway. You can go, you can look at that section of highway, you can see what the culvert condition is. Is that culvert clogged? Is that culvert got a structural problem that it is probably the source of the failure? You can actually just go and look at it. There's a tree down, you know. What did the trees look like in that section? So that's kind of what we're trying to get to. You know, again, one system, one infrastructure, one department, and one system to rule them all, and a system that you can actually use and get the information out of. And again, we're retiring lots and lots of applications by doing this. So it is. I'm not even beginning to express our IT folks. Folks from our ITS cluster are so thrilled with this project because it is making their operation far more efficient because you don't need skill sets and a whole bunch of different languages and architectures and all of this stuff to be able to keep every single, you know, one of these dozens and dozens of applications running. You just need folks that have the expertise in what is in the Agile application and the hardware that we use to manage that. And the other part of the utility function is it begins to really pull the organization together because you have to have these cross-functional discussions about, you know, about pavements versus bridges versus safety instead of having everything, you know, within that particular functional area. Next. Locked and ready to fire. Munis on the mothership. That's the next most exciting thing that we're doing. Joe mentioned that we've been working with New York City. We've kind of exposed New York City to what we're doing. They want to have. They're working to get a contract together with Agile, which we think is pretty awesome. But there's a Department of State initiative for some lower Hudson Valley counties that wanted to get a shrink-wrapped, out-of-the-box, you know, 1999 asset management solution. They spent a year, you know, we showed them what we're doing with Agile. They said, wow, that's too complicated. They spent a year doing lots and lots of research, talking to lots and lots of folks. And after a year, they come back and they said, we really like that Agile solution. But as you know, I mean, we have 1,600 munis in New York. As most of you know, a municipality, a town, a village, a county can't afford Agile, right? But there's the possibility that if you get a critical mass of them, that they can piggyback on what we're doing. They can use our pavement needs models. We can take their inventory and put it into our system and control it with security. So we're figuring out how we can get a business model that allows them to get a discounted, hopefully, license. We figure out the administration of the system, you know, whether Agile hosts, whether Agile administrates, whether we host, you know, who's going to do that sort of user account, help, all of that stuff that you need. But it's pretty exciting because, as most of you know, when at least in New York, a big chunk of our program it comes from the MPOs and it's coming from the locals. And for pavements, we don't have any pavement data. We get on, Google Streets and try to evaluate their projects from what we can see there. And that is really no way to evaluate a Muni's project. So the benefit to us is if they're on the system and they're using our models and they actually have an inventory, and they even perhaps can piggyback on our Fugro contract and we can begin to capture their data. Now you have a whole state. We have the Munis, we have New York City, we have the Thruway Authority, we have state DOT, all using a common platform, all speaking the same language, all using the same models, and you can have a much more objective assessment of projects. Furthering the enterprise, one thing we're going to start talking about in terms of especially SOE is, do we need a data warehouse? Do we need to do some data warehouse design and development? Now that we have all this cross-asset stuff, instead of just looking at what a bridge need or a pavement need is, being able to look at the needs of all assets and see if there are synergies where there are multiple needs on a corridor or an asset type, start to look at projects differently and see if we can find some synergies there. We need to do the NBE extent and defect-driven needs modeling. We need to be able to figure out now that we have this data in this new form, how you actually do that analysis. By coming here, I ran into Pascal. Pascal tells me that they have some approaches that they've had in Europe, because in Europe they've done this kind of inspection and needs modeling. So that's exciting because we're really not finding anybody here who's cracked that nut. And extending ATOA. Right now we're just trading off pavements and bridges. I want to get the safety folks in, because if those are the big three, if we can get pavements, bridges, and safety in, that would really help us make better decisions. I wanted to give a shout out to our team here. This is our team in Albany. Not only are they an asset management team, they are quite a curling team. So it's a shout out to guys like Ashwini and Ting and Eric and Patrick, Abdas, all the folks that we have in Albany. We have a great team in Albany. I am really happy to work with these folks. They've done a really great job, and I'm really grateful to them. And with that, I will entertain questions.
I see Dr. Pilson, a question there? Hold on, I just want to make sure everybody can hear.
I was just going to ask you when you're going to write the paper on the utility analysis, the utility theory side of things for that A2A, the portfolio analysis.
In my free time? That's actually a great suggestion, Charles. That's awesome. It's how do you drain the swamp kind of a thing,
So maybe make sure we clarify the question. It was a little bit cryptic for maybe people who don't know what you're talking about. Again, Dr. Pilson, thank you.
Yeah, Charles wants to know when I'm going to get around to writing a white paper on cross-asset trade-off analysis and the development of our utility functions and all of that. And I would love to be in a position to be able to do that. Maybe we collaborate.
Hey, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Charles, you just came up with an opportunity for yourself.
Thank you for volunteering.
Any other ideas out there? It is fascinating. It is fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool. To me, it is the holy grail of asset management.
I think I see Lonnie from North Carolina, DOT.
Steve, at the beginning, you talked about the emphasis you placed on preservation.
Hey, Lonnie.
And you talked about rewarding those. I'm assuming that you and also you stated that you do your allocation based on need, right? And I just want to make sure I understand when you say your allocation, you're talking about the money that do you get all your money in one big bucket, one big pot that you distribute for pavement and bridges and everything? Or do you have separate pots of money that are specifically for those different assets?
Well, it's essentially the NHPP and STP and state dedicated fund that we have available. We carved that all up. The planning folks worry about the color of money. We do color money after we determine what the allocations are going to be. And the color of money then gets matched to, is the project on the NHS or not on the NHS and those kind of things. But the main thing is, instead of saying this region has X number of lane miles, so they get that part of the pavement funds, we are looking at how many miles of preservation candidates each region has, and then allocating on lane miles of candidates, lane miles of pavements that are good enough to do a lighter pavement treatment up to, what, Mike, 1.5 inches?
Yeah.
So you're,
But it also includes, we do that for pavements. We also do the same exercise for bridges.
Yeah.
Combine them together for each region, right? So now you know a total preservation need for the region. And we have regions instead of districts, right? And so that goes into the allocation. So everybody essentially will get a portion to their bridge and pavement preservation needs.
is that dollar needs?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So then, so if it's dollar needs, if it's proportioned out based on dollar needs, then I guess my question going back, if someone has a greater dollar needs, then how does that not, if someone is less dollar needs because they've been doing great preserving their system,
No, it's actually the opposite of that. If you've done a great job of preserving your system,
you have less
you
dollar
have
needs.
more candidates.
Right.
Because if you've let something fall into the fair category, at that point, it is no longer a preservation candidate. If it's poor, it's not a preservation candidate. So if the more and more of your system that's in those condition states, the fewer miles you have that are available for preservation. We're only counting the miles where you actually still have a preservation candidate.
Right. We're only allocating on the preservation need, not the total need of the region.
Okay.
And then we have a statewide competition for the big project.
Yeah, so anything that's fallen into a fair or poor condition, now you're in the big pool, competing against everybody in the state, and we're using that sort of ranking analysis where we look at all those major projects in the state, and you're competing against everybody. And we rank everything. You're competing against New York City, you're competing against Buffalo, you're competing against everybody for that 25%, which is statewide competition. And then we give 10% out as an allocation to each region to do discretionary capital work, because we've realized they have to do some of
A flat
that.
rate of 10%. So when it goes in the big needs, that's competing against bridges, pavements, everything competing against everything?
Yep.
I mean, it's no, okay.
Well, yes and no. We take the pavement allocation and the bridge out. There is a statewide amount that we put to pavements and a statewide amount we put to bridges.
Okay.
And they are competing for those pieces of the statewide pie.
Okay.
Same with safety.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lonnie.
Okay, any additional questions? Dave Blackstone, I see. Let me come over here.
Steve, you talked about your data governance. Was that a top-down, a bottom-up? Was there policies? What was your carrot? What was your stick? Because it's easy to say you get these other offices together, and of course everybody has their own little turf. So how did you get that participation? How did you get those folks to agree, hey, I'm a bridge guy, but we need to do this because it'll help whatever other office?
My wise guy answer is UB class of '83. Any UBers out there? In 1983, a whole bunch of us graduated from the University of Buffalo. We have all risen to higher levels in the department. One of my best friends became the assistant commissioner for operations. It had the ear of the commissioner. So everyone was doing, that was Those were the standing orders that we are doing this, the commissioner wanted to do this, and everyone was going to play ball. That's essentially what made it work in the beginning. You know, it wasn't goodwill, it was, this is the direction coming from the executive, and but that is, you know, going too extreme. We have good collaboration. I co-chair the statewide pavement management team and the statewide structures management team. The statewide structures management co-chairs are me, from an asset management perspective, Rich Marchione, who is the director of structures, and Brian Kelly, who is a regional director. So we have, you know, the three of us coming from different perspectives overseeing the structures piece, and we collaborate well together. I co-chair with the head of tech services for pavement management. So we're bringing the asset management perspective and the traditional tech services perspective for that. And then centrally, what CAMC became was the CPT, the Comprehensive Program Team. And that has representation from all of the different stakeholder areas. And we collaborate to decide what we're doing overall to make all those cross-asset decisions. How much are we going to put into pavements? How much are we going to put into bridges? How are we going to write the program update instructions? What's our relationship going to be with the MPOs on this? We collaborate to write the TAMP. We collaborate on the TIP-STIP. We collaborate on all of that. That is the central, and that all, a couple of members of that team report to our executive team. So there's a couple execs on that. They report up to the execs, and we oversee the statewide asset teams. So these statewide asset teams report to us. The regional asset teams report to the statewide teams. So that's how we've integrated everything from a governance structure. Did I answer your question?
Well, I guess I understand that part, but what we find is typically you have an office, structures. Mm-hmm. They'll go out, and of course, their purpose of life is basically the inspections to ensure it won't fail, and of course, the MBI. Mm-hmm. But from a planning perspective, such as changing their codes, they could have a general appraisal or whatever. So suddenly, here is an area that says, I'm meeting all of my requirements, and now you're telling me I have to change to benefit another office. And I was just curious whether you did an official governance project to have somebody come in, get the support of the commissioner to say you will do this?
Well, we have a governance structure, we have a charter and all of that, and everyone's bought into the charter and what our values are and how we're gonna interact together and all of that.
Okay.
Still not sure I'm answering your question.
We could talk about it. I know it's just a case of what you're doing I think is great, but what we find is when you drop down in those individual areas, because we're all strapped for people, you know, a lot of us are keeping our heads above water, various offices to meet either federal mandates, state mandates, and then suddenly somebody comes in from a different area and says, you've got to change this to make it more robust. And depending on where that entry point is, if it's a peer, that is basically taken a certain way rather than a director or a commissioner saying you shall do this and actually issuing policies and guidelines to actually implement that.
I think most folks understand, as engineers, I think, you know, the obvious tension. Pavement side, it really isn't an issue. Everyone on the pavement side has bought into the dollar per VMT, you know, the way we manage pavements. Bridges, there's a little bit more tension because traditionally, everyone wants to replace bridges. People came up as bridge designers. They want to design, you know, fancy bridge projects and stuff. That's a lot more exciting than doing deck washing, or deck sealing and bridge washing and
cleaning gutters,
bearing lubrication and that kind of stuff. That's not fun or sexy. I didn't go to college to do that, right? But we have balanced that more. We do probably, we've got like a 65-35 split, preservation versus kind of renewal type projects in how we manage bridges versus pavements, which are a lot more heavily on the preservation side. Folks understand to keep the good thing. It's just the bridge folks are very concerned about, obviously, about poor bridges. But you can't begin. That is such a target-rich environment to replace bridges and such an extremely costly thing. We can only scratch the surface of that problem, and I think folks understand that. Questions?
Okay, we've got time for maybe one more question. excellent presentation. Am I missing anybody there? Steve, thank you very
Great.
much. Great
Thank you.
job.
Thanks, Joe.